Welcome to Startups Uncensored, number 38, with Gary Swart, CEO of oDesk, and Jason Nazar, CEO of DocStock.
Thanks, brother.
I'm going to start clapping, so yeah. And you know, my first thing was, you're not going to be at the bar. Like, you skate out of here, and everybody's looking around saying, where's my drink?
Well, thank you so much for being here. We're going to spend a bunch of time talking about your background, about the company, about the kind of state of the industry right now, and all sorts of great things, just to kind of give you a sense of everyone that we're dealing with. So show of hands again. If you are currently running your own business, hands up. And how many of you in the next couple months are looking to raise money? All right. How many folks here have used or are currently using oDesk? And how many folks know what how many folks know what oDesk is?
Wow, thank you.
Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, thanks, great.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
So why don't we start off for the small handful of schmucks that actually don't know what oDesk is, right? I know you guys. I know you were out there. I saw which one of you didn't raise your hand.
I did not. So. Yeah.
Why don't we start off with what oDesk is, and then we'll go into your background.
Sure. So we're the world's largest online workplace. What we enable companies to do is to hire, to manage, and to pay talent via the internet. And we started the company with the belief that the talent doesn't live where the jobs exist, right? There's, what are the chances that the best talent is within a 50-mile radius of your office? And even if they are and you can find them, can you afford them? Can you attract them? Do you have the time and energy to bring them in? And there's this thing called e-commerce out there that started probably about 20 years ago, where you find the right good, get delivery of the good, and pay for the good via the web. Well, we said, why shouldn't you be able to do the same thing for talent? Find the right worker, get delivery of the work, and pay for the work via the web. And it doesn't have to be all work, just like it doesn't have to be all commerce, right? We don't buy everything via the internet. As a matter of fact, does anybody know the percentage of goods after 20 years of e-commerce? What's the percentage of goods that are bought online versus on-site in the US? Anybody?
8%.
What?
8%.
8%? Anybody think higher? 6%. To me, I was blown away. I'm thinking it's got to be 30 or 40%. It's only 6%, yet it's a massive market with lots of room to grow. And we started thinking, well, what does work look like if it's 6% of all work being found, managed, and paid via the internet? And so that's what we set out to do, and that's what we're doing.
Cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your background. Where are you from originally?
So I hail from New Jersey, a town called Westfield, New Jersey, about 20 miles southwest of Manhattan. I went to school at University of Maryland, ended up back in New Jersey. Go Terps. Yeah, that's a turtle for anybody who doesn't know. It's like a high-class turtle, He's got a little scarf and a bend, like smokes a pipe. So I went to University of Maryland, ended up back in New Jersey, and then started reading about Silicon Valley years ago and saying, wow, I wonder what's going on out there, all this Oracle and Dell and all this great computer
stuff.
What
did you first start doing for work after college?
I went into manufacturing, and a great move, an industry that was going like this, and I realized that very quickly. It was fun, though. I mean, I was an entrepreneur. I went to work for myself out of college. I had two offers, Toys R Us or Allstate Insurance, and I chose to go the road less traveled, which was to go work for myself.
Were your parents entrepreneurial?
No, my dad worked for Exxon, Esso. He had one job his whole life. So out of college, he went to work for Esso, which became Exxon, and he had one job, one career. My grandfather was an entrepreneur, and he had a big influence on me. So I was the kid at school who was, buying candy on the way to school and selling each piece for a nickel. You know what I mean? And making $5.
We're actually going to invoice you for all the stuff I threw out afterwards.
Yeah. So I've always had this entrepreneurial spirit. It's funny because at University of Maryland, I ended up in this fraternity house. And it was almost like who could outdo one another on businesses. And it was really an exciting environment. And one of the best things that happened in college were one of my fraternity brothers, his dad was the photographer for the Washington Post. And he got a picture of Reagan shaking hands with somebody, and they started fooling around with it, and they blew it up, and they mounted it on cardboard. And if you stood holding this cardboard cutout, it looked like you were having a photo with shaking Reagan's hand. Anybody remember this? It's called Photo with the President. Years ago, Reagan was around. So you charge $5 in Washington, D.C. for a photo. You can make $2,000 or $3,000 on a Sunday afternoon. It was unbelievable how much money these guys were reeling. And then he started saying, well, what if we had 10 Reagans? What if we had 100 Reagans? What if we sold Reagans and cameras and film to people and they could franchise their own thing? And what if we had not only Reagan, but Hulk Hogan and Don Johnson and Princess Charles and Diana and, like all these celebrities. And so it was an amazing business. And just to see that grow and be part of it was really fun.
That's neat.
Yeah.
That first manufacturing business, how did you even get into that? What were you doing?
Yeah, so my grandfather helped set me up. He had been in that business, and so he connected me with some people. And essentially, I was like a middleman, matching up buyers and sellers of precision metal products. So there's companies that need stuff made. There's lots of people that are good at making it, but they're not good at selling their services. And so I met a half a dozen of these firms, these manufacturing plants who had lots of capacity and capability. And I found people that needed stuff made, and then I could shop around and make money in the middle. And they call it a 10%er, but you can make a lot more, as long as you could get in between a buyer and a seller.
And then did you ever go back to working for somebody, or did you kind of stay on the entrepreneurial path?
I stayed on that entrepreneurial path, and I had a bunch of different things going, while I was doing that, but it was very lucrative. I worked for myself. I liked the fact that I was sort of in control. Like, I had a beach house in New Jersey, and I could take off on a Wednesday and go down to the beach if that's what I wanted to do, and I love that freedom and flexibility. But when I decided that manufacturing was an industry that was in decline and technology was an industry that was, rising very aggressively, I decided that it'd be good to get out to Silicon Valley and get into something that was more, that had more of a future. And so I launched a job search and got an offer from a wife of a friend who said, "Oh, you'd be great in sales, and I want to hire you into this company." And I started a little company called Pure Software. And it was a fantastic company. We went public in the mid-90s, but it was a software development tools company. We helped software developers write better software. Mm-hmm. And they needed it. Vice presidents of engineering and CFOs.
How early did you come onto the company? How early did you
I was employee number less than 2018 or something like that, and one of the first sales guys. And this product, first piece of advice for the night, if you're going to go into sales, go to a company where the product sells itself. That's the first piece of advice. This thing was a puppy dog. If you put it in somebody's hands, they were like, "Oh, I got to have it." It saved time, and it was brilliant. I mean, it was so brilliant. So I just
even more brilliant than the Reagan photo.
Yeah, it was a great business. It was started by a guy by the name of Reed Hastings. Anybody know who Reed Hastings is? Yeah. So that was Reed's first company, and took the company public.
CEO of Netflix.
Yeah, CEO of Netflix. And I don't know why I tell this story, but I was invited to be employee number 3 at Netflix, and I didn't think DVDs in an envelope were a good idea at the time. But anyway, along the lines of experience and wisdom gained throughout my tenure, that was an interesting.
So after that company goes public, then where'd your path take you?
So Pure went public, a couple of great quarters, started acquiring companies.
How do you turn down Reed Hastings? What's the conversation? Reed calls you, he's like, "Hey, Gary, would really love you to join this new venture I'm doing, basically to be the first person in it." What's your response to him?
Well, I'll tell you my response, but I said, "Why don't you mail me the offer?" Ha 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 ha! Like, who's mailing anything? So yeah. Who's had the last laugh on that one? But well, let me tell you what happened, because I think there's a valuable lesson here, which is, there's a lot of valuable lessons here. But Pure acquired a bunch of companies and then merged with a company of equal size called Atria. And we were so indecisive as to what to call the company, we called it Pure Atria. Very innovative. But Pure Atria actually got acquired by Rational Software. Rational was a much bigger company. I had a big role at Pure Atria. And when Rational acquired Pure Atria, they did a really good job of acquiring the company, and they offered me a big job. They said, "We're going to give you national responsibility. You're going to have 150 people. You're going to have a big number. We're going to give you lots of stock to stick around. We're going to give you a big comp. You're going to be on the leadership team." And I was really excited. I liked the people. I liked the opportunity. And here's Reed, who was the CEO of Pure Atria, and Mark Randolph, who was the vice president of marketing at Pure Atria. They got in a conference room with the head of HR from Pure Atria, Patty McCord, and they said, "What are we going to do next?" And for 2 months, they did nothing but map out on the whiteboard ideas of what was going to be next. And then Mark was the one that came to me and said, "Hey, we got an idea. We want you to come with us. And this is what we're going to do." And I remember saying, "What are you talking about? I'm going to Blockbuster." He goes, "No, people hate Blockbuster. They don't like lines. They don't like late fees. Brick and mortar, the number of DVD players is going to increase tenfold in the next 5 years alone. this is going to be huge. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? He goes, ready? Executive producer. That'll be your title, right? And I was like, I don't know. And I didn't have a reason to leave. I liked the opportunity at Rational. I realized at that time, now looking back, why didn't I leave? Why didn't I take the risk? Because I had the 4 things that were important to me. I had impact, right? I think everybody wants to go to work somewhere where they can make a big impact. Not only can they make a big impact for the company, but they can make an impact for the world. And I was drinking the Kool-Aid that we were doing something great for the world. Helping people to write better software apparently was good for the world. And so I bought into the story, but I really liked the impact, the job that I had. I felt like I can do this job well and I can get recognized for it and that'll be meaningful, right? The second thing was growth and development. I had never worked for a company with 700-800 employees as part of a big merger, and just to go through that alone, I thought, oh, this will be a great learning experience. If I ever come down this path again, I'll have experience doing it. And not only that, I liked the leadership team. I was going to be managing a bigger team. I was going to have national responsibility. I had national responsibility before Pure Atria, but this was much bigger. This was 150 people, not 35 people, right? So I thought, wow, 5 times the scope of the job. That's exciting. The third thing was financial reward. They were paying me a lot of money. It would have been painful to leave, to go to a startup where I would have been not eating ramen noodle, but not making as much, right? Without stock it was vesting immediately, but it was paper. It was worthless, where the Rational stock had value, right? And then the fourth thing is balance, right? Whatever you do outside of work, does your opportunity afford you that balance? When I was an entrepreneur out of college, I had balance. I could go to the beach if I wanted to go to the beach, right? That's balance. So
how often did you go to the beach?
I went a lot, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I went a lot.
There you go.
Because it was different. You didn't have to be there all the time. Nowadays, with the internet, you're always on, so I feel like I'm always working regardless of where I am. So, impact, growth and development, financial reward, and balance was sort of the things that I was looking for, in addition to a good company, people, a big space, meaningful product, et cetera. And so I didn't have a reason to leave. Rational got acquired by IBM. I found myself again at the same table. Impact. They said, we're going to give you global responsibility. You're going to be one of 3 executives at Rational who's going to be on the integration team. So I went from employee number 20 to employee number 131,000. And once again, I felt like I had all of those things. So I stayed at IBM for 2 years after Rational acquired us. And then I said, I got to get the hell out of here. I need to go back to the jungle. Right?
And where'd you go next?
And then I helped found a little company called IntelliBank. And IntelliBank was a really brilliant idea, and we had a beautiful product. Check this out. Drag and drop documents into a folder on your desktop and share them with people, regardless of where they are. Isn't that a great idea?
We had Aaron Levy earlier this year.
Yeah. So 7 years ago, that's what we were doing, and it was beautiful. I tell Aaron today, I'm like, Aaron, we had more functionality 7 years ago than you have today, which was our problem. Second lesson of the night, focus, right? We were trying to be all things to all people. Our routes to market were off. Dropbox did a much better job of acquiring customers. The market was too early. We were competing against SharePoint. So many mistakes, but IntelliBank actually became part of a company that was sold to Salesforce, a guy by the name of Mark Schuster. Everybody knows Mark, he's a local guy, and Mark and I got to know each other. We tried to put IntelliBank together with his company, Build Online, and that didn't work out. So Mark took some of the people from IntelliBank and the technology and built a company called Coral and sold it to Salesforce.
But you did sell the company to Salesforce?
I left, so
Oh,
I
you were
wasn't
gone
part
already.
of it. Yeah, I left. But Mark successfully sold it to Salesforce.
Yeah. All right, and then after that?
I was trying to raise money at IntelliBank, and we were caught between an A and a B. So we weren't big enough to be a B. We weren't far enough. They didn't have as much angel as they do now. We had raised a couple $1 million, which is a lot of money. And so we didn't have enough traction for a B round. We had too much traction and money for an A round, and we got caught in between without a repeatable use case and a good business model and without the right team. And so in the process of trying to raise money, I probably spoke to about at least 20 VCs trying to raise money for IntelliBank, and that's a humbling experience. And you find yourself changing your pitch from VC to VC. In the process of trying to raise money for IntelliBank, I met the fine folks at Sigma Partners, and they kept having me back, saying, hey, can you come back and talk about this IntelliBank thing? And every time I'd go in, they'd pick at it. And finally, one of the partners took me to breakfast and said, listen, we like you, not IntelliBank. We want to stick you in one of our other companies. And they introduced me to the founders of oDesk, and I immediately saw the potential and then joined them, and that's where we are today.
We'll talk about oDesk in a second. In the fundraising process, because you're obviously a great speaker, a good pitch person, making my job easy. You tell your own lessons to the audience. You're like, here's another lesson for you. I'm like, wow, I don't have to do anything up here. What have you kind of seen are some of the key ingredients to successfully raise money? Because there's a large handful of people here that are looking to raise money. Again, raise your hands if in the next 3 months you're going to be looking to raise money, right?
Good.
So you got at least a dozen folks.
Yeah.
If you got a business that's killing it like oDesk, it's like the software. It sells itself.
Yeah.
Right. But when you're in the grind, when you're hustling it out, what are the things that you can do as the person courting those relationships and doing the pitching that can help out?
There's so many great resources online for this. One good resource, I don't know if Sequoia still does it, but they had if you're going to pitch us, here's the 10 slides we want, and it might be in the resource section. I think that's fantastic. There's another guy by the name of David Cowan at Bessemer Ventures, and he's got some good guidance out there as to how to put your deck together. At IntelliBank, let me tell you about some of the mistakes we made at IntelliBank. One, we weren't telling a crisp story. We had 100 customers of 50 different flavors. And the problem with that is that you don't have this repeatable use case that you can go replicate over and over and over again. So investors are wondering how you're going to scale it. It's not that it's not a great idea, but it wasn't focused. And so making sure that your idea is as narrow as possible, yet still telling a big enough story. So even if you say, hey, we're going to start with this and then expand to that after we prove this, I think that's better than saying, we're going to boil the ocean, give me money. And so not trying to go too big too early, but narrow the scope, be able to, in the early days, you're either selling PowerPoint or Excel. And what I mean is you've got a really great story, you've got a great team, you've got a big market, you've got some, you get the investor to nod that, yes, this is a big problem, and yes, I understand people have this pain, and yes, I understand that somebody would be willing to pay for it. And if you can do that in PowerPoint, and yes, I believe that you are the people that can execute on this opportunity, we're going to give you a little bit of money to go figure that out. And figure that out means to get not from point A to point F, but point A to point B, right? Give you $1 million, and what we want to see is product and 10 beta customers and that, right? So it's very scoped. And I think investors like that when you say, hey, this is what we think the real opportunity is, but we're going to start by proving this, and that's what we're going to do with your $1 million, right? And once we do that, then we're going to get 10 million, and then we're going to go to the next sphere and the next sphere. And I think with IntelliBank, we were trying to go too big. We weren't focused. I don't think we told a great story around team, right? We had some people who had, one guy who was successful before, but I don't think we had the right people behind it, so it just wasn't a good story. But the framing of the deck, I really like this is a problem. Do you recognize this is a problem? Here's the proof that people want to fix this problem. Here's how we're going to do it differently, and this is why we're good at it, right? And I think telling that story, if you can get the heads in the room going, oh yeah, we're bought into this is a problem. If you can get them to the point where they can't wait to hear about your solution, then I think you're off to a good start.
Cool. And so let's talk about oDesk when you got there. There were 2 co-founders, right?
Yeah.
And how far along was the company at that point?
It was not very far along. There was this cool product for managing distributed workers. So it would, basically we have this team room concept where if I'm working for you, I log into the team room. As soon as I log in, you now can verify that I'm working for you and course correct me in real time. And the way it works is you get a screenshot of my desktop 6 times an hour at random intervals. And that screenshot validates that an hour billed is actually an hour worked. So think of it as automated time tracking and billing via the internet. And that's a pretty innovative concept because it enabled us to best replicate the way that work happens in the offline world. And so the product was there, and they were trying to sell the product as a standalone SaaS-based solution for managing distributed workers. And that's a really tough sell because it's a change mode. You're going into a company that already has workers who may be offshore, and you're saying, how would you like to use this tool to manage them? And it's a tough, you're introducing something new into a relationship that already exists.
Yeah, how much money had the company raised at that point?
The company, I came in with the A round, which was $5 million.
Okay, and then how many folks were in the company? How many
So there
people
was
worked
a dozen people in the company, but the first thing that we did was skinny it
Based
down.
out of the Bay Area, right?
All based in the Bay Area, yeah. So we took the company down, within a week we got rid of half the people and kind of rebuilt from there.
Got it. All right, so you come into the company, had it raised much money before the A round at all?
Nothing, it was credit cards prior to that.
Got it. 2 co-founders, they built up to 12. So they were building a profitable business, or a business that was making some cash to support them, right?
No, they were racking up debt on credit cards.
Really?
Yeah,
With 12 folks?
Yeah.
Wow, that's kind of ballsy, though,
Yeah.
of the co-founders, right?
Yeah, it was really ballsy. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And our co-founders are still very much engaged and alive and kicking, and they're still.
Well, they were younger than you would imagine. They were alive, right? And not like 100.
Yeah. They're good guys.
All right, so let's fast forward just the frame of reference. And what year was that?
That was 2006.
2006. So today, how many employees are there at oDesk?
So we have 130 employees. We probably have about 20 open recs right now, so we're aggressively hiring. Again, it's really competitive.
How much money have you raised?
We've raised $44 million. We have...
And the additional, that additional $40 million came in how many rounds after the first 5?
We've raised 4 rounds. So we took a B from Benchmark, we took a C from a company led by a company called DAG, and then we took our D round last year from a gentleman by the name of Henry Ellenbogen at T. Rowe Price, who's phenomenal. He's a late stage. He manages $11 billion for T. Rowe Price. What's he doing investing in startups? He likes category leaders, innovative businesses, disruptive. He's in Twitter, LinkedIn, oDesk, Zillow before they go public. He likes to get in a year or 2 in advance.
And so is the thought now for you guys public or bust, or would you still consider an acquisition?
I think this is a huge opportunity. If you think about, again, the e-commerce analogy, imagine all work, all size companies, all work types globally. That's a massive market. We're the market leader. We're twice the size of the nearest competitor. We're growing faster. We're bigger than the next 10 combined. So I think it's a winner-take-most market, and we think that the market is big enough to support a large publicly traded company. So that's the goal.
What are some of the, talk about your most popular categories. What are folks going to your outsourced distributed workforce to use most today?
It started mostly with technical work. So technical is still very popular, just about 50% of the work. In 2007, 4 categories accounted for 90% of the work, mostly tech. Today, that's more like 35 categories. So it's very eBay-like. Beanie Baby, Pez dispenser, tchotchke, Rolex car. We're seeing Rolexes in car. So we're getting pulled into content creation, writing, managerial, accounting, legal, bioinformatics, data science, theoretical physicist. I mean, any job that can be done in front of the web. You're seeing some really bizarre things start to happen.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the new categories that are breaking out now?
Managerial. So people want managers who can manage online teams. And we're seeing that really grow aggressively. So they want to hire somebody who can go hire 10 more people and manage them all via the web. And so I think there's a whole career there, right? There's a job career around managing distributed resources. We're seeing a lot around content creation and content moderation. Mm-hmm. We're seeing some very, very large teams form in that regard. We're seeing a lot of customer support and sales. And it's not sales like, hey, I need a sales rep. It's really like sales enablement and sales research. And expensive sales reps are spending time researching the call as opposed to making the call. Well, why not have somebody else do that? So it's all about leverage. How do you get leverage for your employees so your resources, you're getting best and highest use out of your team?
Got it. So talk about you come in, the company's not making any revenue, you take it down to 5 or 6 folks. And you move the product from a SaaS solution to, I guess it's still, you're still targeting businesses, but in a very different product line. What did that first year look like? And how did you actually break out and have success, right? A lot of us in this room are trying to figure out, what do we do with our businesses over the next year to get the kind of scale that somebody wants to invest in it for that business to be able to sustain itself? What is it that you all did to be successful in that first year or 2?
Yeah, this is a great. We could spend the rest of the night just talking about this one thing. So when I came into the company, there was something that was fundamentally wrong. We had dozen people, 6 people were going this way, and 6 people were going this way. And on day 2, I had one of the people in this camp take me to lunch and say, so what do you think we should do? You know, that a bunch of us think we should do this. And, you know, those other guys, there were some
What were the 2 directions the
kids from
company was
MIT
going?
want to go the other way. Well, there was one group that wanted to create a marketplace. So think of it as just like eBay, right? You come in, you find the talent, you match with the talent, you go off and you work via the web. And we're not in the middle. We're just a market maker, and we're going to help you finding match. We're going to give you tools to manage, and we're going to help you pay, but we're not in the middle of the work. The other camp wanted to be more like a staffing firm. We're going to take responsibility for the hire. We're going to guarantee the person. We're going to help you to hire. We're going to help you to manage. Very high touch. And wanted to go to enterprises. Let's go to Synopsys. Let's go to Oracle. And let's help them staff. But the staff isn't going to be on-premise temps. They're going to be online temps. But that's a heavy sales force, lots of account management. You're standing in the middle, right? You're more the representative of the talent, right? And we very quickly, there was this tension, and every day people were operating, these 6 were going that way, and these 6 were going that way. So I don't think it was at the company 30 days where I said, okay, everybody calm down, we're going to figure out what the best way to go is. And I listened to both sides, we gathered the data, and we said, you know what, we're going this way. We're going to go marketplace. And that doesn't mean we're not going to deliver great value. We're still going to have some touch, but we're going to be a marketplace. And this is the way that we're going. And I had a bunch of disgruntled people over here that said, oh, that's the wrong decision. I don't want to be part of that. And 2 of the people, I said, look, you don't want to be part of it? If you don't want to be on the bus, get off the bus. Like, this is the way the bus is going. So the fundamental, at the highest level, what I think everybody needs to do is you need to have clarity as to where you're going. And everybody needs to know what that is. And then they have to know, everybody on the team, whether it's 6 people or 12 people, they have to know how you're going to get there. So you have to say, this is what we are, this is what we're going to be, and here's the way we're going to get there, right? So we're going to drive to Colorado, and we're taking Route 80. That's what we're doing, okay? The next thing everybody needs to know is what is their responsibility on that bus, right? So where are we going, how are we going to get there, and what are you responsible for, and what am I responsible for? Because the absence of that, you could have people doing the same job or not clear as to who's doing what, or people are duplicating tasks or efforts. So you have to be crystal clear about who's doing what. You've got the stereo, you've got maps, I've got the steering wheel, you've got rest stops, you know, whatever it is, right? Like, everybody needs to know their responsibility, and then people need to know what their standards are. How should they measure whether or not they're successful at that responsibility? And without that, how do people know if they're doing a good job for themselves, back to impact, and how do others know that they're doing a good job? How do you avoid finger pointing? I'm doing my job, but that guy over there sucks. So what we did very quickly was we got that clarity. We got clarity as to where we were going, how we were going to get there, who was doing what, how we were going to measure, and then we went to the company and we said, look, this is the bus, this is where it's going. If you want in, great. If you don't want in, you should leave now. A couple people left now. Great.
What did you do to drive demand those first year or 2? Was it just, did it happen organically, or did you guys, I mean, how did you really get people starting to use the platform to find people they wanted to work with?
Marketplace businesses are tough because they're very much chicken and egg businesses. So, you know, I could flip it to you and say, what do you think is more important? Should we have had chickens or eggs? Do we need more workers or do we need more jobs? And the problem is it's hard to get one without the other. It's hard to go out and get a client to say, oh yeah, I'll use you to get work done. Who have you got in the back room? Who's on the shelf? Well, if you don't have product on the shelf, you can't get clients. If you don't have clients, you can't get product on the shelf. And so what we did was we leaned in very heavily and we created momentum by hand, right? I call it hamsterware. It looks like it's automated in the front, but behind the scenes, you got a little hamster on a wheel running to keep up. But you as a client didn't know that we were hand matching in the back room, right? We'd get a resume and we'd send it to you and say, ta-da, here's a guy, right? And we knew he was available because we were talking to him. So we would talk to every client and we would talk to every contractor and we would hand vet both. And so the way oDesk worked in the beginning is we asked every client, they would ping our website, we would actually call them back or text them back, you know, online chat. We would say, let me tell you how it works. Here's a quick demo. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get a great PHP programmer. You give us $100, and that $100 goes towards your first hour's work. If you hire a guy for $10 an hour, it's 10 hours. And that $100 was a way for us to figure out how motivated they were, how interested were they, and how qualified were they. If they didn't have $100, they weren't that qualified, or they weren't that interested, right? And so we used that as a way to figure out who to spend time with. And on the contractor side, we interviewed everybody. But we got to the point where we figured out that, shoot, we can't talk to every client and we can't interview every contractor. So after about 4 to 6 months, we got out of the middle. We said, we can't interview anymore. We can't charge $100. Let's do away with it. Let's let the marketplace deal with each other.
But you're also doing a lot of temp work, right? Stuff that's, I just need somebody to do this for this many hours and...
Yeah,
right.
But you'd be surprised. From the very beginning of oDesk, what we had done was we replicated the way that work happens in the offline world, which is based on time. Most of us get hired and fired based on our results, but we get paid based on the time that we work. And we were different from all the other also-rans and companies that had tried to do this before, because all these other companies were fixed price. Build me this widget, and I'll pay you this amount of money, right? And that's cool for some jobs, but it's really hard. The bigger the job gets, the harder it is to spec what you really want. And so you end up with a lot of disputes, a lot of disgruntled customers, lots of disintermediation. I'll pay you $100 for the first job, but then everything else is going to happen off the platform. And what we did was we gave the match away for free and made money on every hour worked. So from the very beginning, we saw assignments. Once you match a good programmer with a good company, they're still billing. We have companies that have been billing with the same people for 5 years.
And how do you make sure, how do you manage that people don't go off platform, right? Like, hey, send me your details, we'll work something else outside of oDesk.
So you have to add enough value after the match. The match is valuable in and of itself, but if you don't add enough value, then you're going to get cut out of the loop. And our value from the beginning was guaranteed work. We can guarantee to a client that an hour billed is an hour worked, and that's worth a lot. Customers know that on our platform, 40 hours is more like 30 hours because our time tracking is very accurate or stingy. And for the contractors, we guarantee payment. So, if you're a contractor and you're stay-at-home mom in Michigan and you're writing away and you write for 40 hours, I don't know, $15, $20 an hour, and then the client at the end of the week says, yeah, I don't really like the writing, I'm not going to pay. What do? You're in Michigan. Are you going to drive to LA and collect your few $100? oDesk pays the worker, guaranteed. We pay at the end of the week whether we collect the money from the client or not. And then we go to the client and say, listen, you signed a deal that says you're going to pay for the hour. In the state of California, you'd owe the money, right? Now, it's not a great business model if you don't make those clients happy, and it's a really hard problem, right? Because you have to, if clients don't get good quality work, they're not coming back, and they're definitely not going to tell a friend how great you are. So you have to ensure quality without being in the middle. And it's really hard to do.
How many overall clients have you had? So not how many folks have you gotten jobs, but how many overall clients?
560,000.
Wow. And then how many individuals have you gotten work for?
We have 3.5 million in the network, but only less than 1 million have actually worked, right?
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You can say that you've gotten jobs for over 1 million people.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. I think that's worth a round of applause.
Yeah, last year alone, it was more than 36 million hours.
And you take the company takes a percentage of all the billings.
We take 10% of every hour billed. And
whatever the rate is.
Whatever the rate is. Rate is set by the contractor and agreed to by the client. We're going to help you find and match. You're going to contract through our platform, so everything's documented. And the rate is in the aisle, not at the register. So when you pick up the contractor in the aisle, if they're $22 an hour, that's all you're going to pay is $22 an hour. When we collect the 22 from you, we keep 2 and we give 20 to the contractor.
That's great. So what have been some of the biggest challenges you faced along the way as you scale? What just in general, some of the biggest challenges?
Yeah.
What was 1 or 2 things that you just was like, this is really hard?
There's so many things along the way. In a marketplace business, one of our board members and our executive chairman, Thomas Layton, was the CEO of OpenTable for 7 years before he bought in Jeff Jordan to take him public. And Thomas, 6 years ago, said to me, get ready for the long haul. These businesses take a long time. And we were growing so fast at the time, I was like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is going to be easy. And here we are 6 years later, and I still feel like we're building the marketplace. And what's challenging is in these marketplace businesses, not only do you need the liquidity, buyers and sellers, but as you grow and as you scale, you need more liquidity because, remember I said 35 categories? Well, now you need liquidity in other categories. You have clients that want translation work done, but you don't have enough translators. Or you have a lot of writers, but you don't have enough writing jobs. And so you're constantly, it feels like in some categories you're starting from scratch, right? The other big challenge for us is quality, despite the fact we're not in the middle of the transaction. We're not in the middle of the relationship. I'm not hand.
But if someone does poor work, they're not going to come back to you 2 years of service.
Yeah, exactly. And if somebody does poor work, think about it in the offline world. Has anybody here ever hired an employee that didn't work out? Flip a coin whether or not you get it right. Well, how about on temporary work where you may be crossing a border where it's, you didn't properly vet, maybe you weren't crystal clear about what you needed, yet you're going to hold us responsible for that work. And our VP of marketing, she was the vice president of marketing at Amazon 10 years ago, and then she was the VP of marketing at OpenTable, and she's brilliant. And Jalais says, you have to give people a reason to tell a friend and then a way to tell a friend. And she said that at OpenTable, customers used to call them and say, hey, OpenTable, I want my money back. I got a bad steak at the restaurant. She'd be like, what are you talking about? We're just a reservation platform. So people want to hold us accountable to the deliverable despite the fact I didn't look at the job, I didn't help you hire, I gave you tools to hire successfully, but I wasn't in the communication and I didn't help manage the work.
So let's talk about that process, because I think one of the things that is surprising is as you start to grow your company is how hard it is to really identify a great team and build a team and hire. So I'd love to just understand more of the mechanics of how you personally hire, what you ask in the interview process, and also how you terminate, what that process is like, because a lot of these folks are going through it. So what kind of questions do you ask in an interview process, and what do you do when you're one-on-one in a room with a candidate?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it up a level, and I'll specifically go down there, so it'll be a longer answer. I draw a pyramid when we talk about hiring, and then I divide that pyramid into 4 triangles. So you cut the top, and then you draw an upside-down triangle. You have these 4 triangles within a triangle. And at the top is personal characteristics. Right below that is motivation. Left is skill. Right is knowledge. And these are the things that you look for out of an employee. The personal characteristics, the motivation, what's driving them, why do they want this job, what is it that they want out of life and a career, and what are the things that are important to them, their skill and their knowledge. The skill is, are they a CPA? Can they sell? Can they market? And their knowledge is, do they have domain expertise? Are they coming out of eBay? So maybe they have some relevant experience in a marketplace business, right? Or are they coming out of an accounting firm and you need somebody who has that domain expertise? Out of those 4 triangles, which one is the most important thing that you have to get right?
Personal behavior. Personal characteristics.
Yeah, so why are personal characteristics the most important?
Integrity.
It drives all the other.
Drives everything else, right? Like whenever I had to fire somebody, it's not because they didn't have the skill or the knowledge, it's because they didn't have the right personal characteristics, right? You can't change it, right? So I had a boss, and I say this and everybody laughs at me, it's probably on Twitter somewhere, you can teach a chicken to climb a tree, but you're better off getting a squirrel in the first place. And so you might as well look for squirrels. So it's really important that you know what the personal characteristics are that you're looking for. So if you're hiring a sales rep, well, guess what? I need tenacious. I need a go-getter. I need an athlete. I absolutely have to have high integrity. I don't want somebody selling something that we can't deliver. And so these things, it's really good to define those and then to look for those. Now the problem is those things are really hard to uncover in an interview because people are really good at interviewing. And again, I'll go back to flip a coin. Patty McCord, who I mentioned earlier, who was the head of HR at Pure Atria, who became chief people officer, chief talent officer at Netflix. She was smart enough to go. And Patty, I was asking her about somebody, I was doing a back channel reference, and she said, yeah, this guy's really good, and I'd give him 40% on hiring. And I go, what are you talking about 40% on hiring? She goes, oh yeah, he's that good. I'm like, that good? So at Netflix, they call 40% good. That's how realistic they are about how hard it is to hire. So the single best thing you can do to uncover personal characteristics.
Is that a 40% likelihood that they
that
get
they
hired? Make it.
That they make it. That they hire and stick, right?
For more than a year.
For more than, for the duration, right?
Yeah.
And they can't afford to hire people and churn them out in a year because it's too expensive, right? So they want people who are going to be there, be contributors, and stay. And so, if you haven't read Netflix Culture Deck, it's brilliant. You can find it online, and they have a concept in there saying, fire brilliant jerks. Fire people who are brilliant, but they're jerks. It's not, life's too short. Don't have to work with them. So, personal characteristics, yes, you can get some gut in the interview, but more importantly is to back channel. It's to go to somebody who's worked with them before, not who they give you as a reference, but who you know knows what an A looks like, and say and ask, is this person tenacious? Do they have high integrity? Can you give me an example of where they've done that before?
So what are the questions you ask? 'Cause one of the things that I struggle with is, how do you meet somebody once, twice, maybe you spend, a total of 2 or 3 hours with them, and you do all the background checking, but what is it that you do in that one-on-one environment? What are some of the tricks and things you learn along the way to do differently to spot, like, I think there's something really here?
Well, I focus most of my time on the motivation, which is that second bucket, and I don't even go to the skills and knowledge. I kind of feel like, you have that coming in, we can see that on the resume, we're going to trust that. I usually spend a lot of time on the motivation because I want to get to what drives them and what is it that they're looking for, and can we offer that? Because if we can't, then you're just going to have a mismatch.
And so what kind of questions do you ask?
I get right to it and say, what are the things that you're looking for out of a company, out of a team, out of a job, right? Like, tell me the components. What is it that you like doing? What is it that you're good at? And I try and get a sense of their personal characteristics by asking them about what kind of people do they want to work with. Tell me about things on a team that went well and what were the characteristics of those. Have they ever had to fire somebody, and why did they have to fire him, and what were the characteristics of the person they fired? What went wrong? Like, I try and get a sense of.
Do you have one of those? Do you have one of those like out of left field questions?
I have a bunch of those. I like continuum questions. So there's one that I like. I love this question. I'll ask.
Star Trek reference we're talking about now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll ask a question. This isn't left field, but I'll get to left field. I ask a question. I say a continuum question. Are you more of an individual contributor or a team player? So what's the right answer to that question? Yeah, both. I'm a 5 on a scale of 10. Well, you can't be a 5. Which one where do you think you excel, and why do you excel there?
Depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, okay, so great. We're going to have a great conversation about it. I'm going to learn a ton out of the conversation. It's not the answer to the question, it's the dialogue that we're going to have. I want to see your thought process. I like to see how people oh shit, what's the right answer? What does he want to hear? Well, it depends on the day of the week and the role and this and that, go like that. Sometimes I spin. I like the question, are you a hill taker or a hill figure outer? Right? Like, what are you better at? I mean, are you figuring out which hill to take? Are you better at sort of the strategy and determining what hill are we going to tackle? Are you better at tackling the hill once we've figured that out? Right? Like, which one are you, how do you go? Well, I'm good at both. I like figuring out the hill, and then I like taking it. Well, why? What are you better at? And I really drive to see, to get to the integrity. I like to see how realistic people are. I'll ask.
It's funny you say that, because I think one of the things that bothers me, you talked earlier, how when you're pitching VCs, not to try to be all things to all people. It drives me crazy when in an interview somebody tries to answer the question just with complete, well, I'm this and I'm that and I do this, and it's just like,
ready?
You're not helping your case. Just
ready? I am a hill taker. I'm not a brilliant hill figure outer. I'm just not, I'm not that smart. I'm not strategic enough. But I've surrounded myself with people that are brilliant hill figure outers because I don't have that capability. So one of the best things an entrepreneur can do is recognize what are they good at, what do they like doing, and then surround themselves with people who have other capabilities that they don't have. And I think what happens is most people surround themselves with people that are like them, not unlike them, right? And it's really hard to do. Right? I mean, I used to be like that. I used to only hire salespeople that were just like me. And what I realized is, there's lots of different salespeople out there who are.
And when did that finally start to click? When did you start to make that switch?
When you started seeing people that couldn't scale, right? And I think another thing entrepreneurs have to recognize is that companies go through stages, right? And I categorize it. Anybody who's heard me speak before, seen anything I've done, I talk about the jungle, the dirt road, and the highway. And in the jungle, what do you need? Well, you certainly don't need an Escalade because you're going to get stuck in the mud. You need machetes. And you need people who are resilient and can hack through vines and, go without water. And so, in the early stage of our company, we had a lot of people who were great with machetes. And then all of a sudden we started emerging onto this dirt road, and I'd try and take one of these guys with a machete in each hand and put him in the Jeep and say, okay, now drive. And he was cutting everybody because he's, like, I'm like, put the machete down. And he kept running back into the jungle. And what I realized was, shoot, it's time for that guy to go. He's a brilliant guy. And, to the extent you have lots of jungle stuff, you can keep giving him, go handle this initiative and now that initiative and go tackle Europe and, go figure this out. He was great at figuring it out. He was like MacGyver, duct tape, glue, 70% solution, but it was fast and it was good. But then a lot of that stuff started breaking on the highway, mirrors falling off, and we needed people who could drive Jeeps. And so you have to bring in different capability at different times. And it's hard because you had asked earlier, how do you fire? How do you say goodbye to somebody?
Well, I was about to say that. What's the process that you go through when you want to part ways with a member of your team? How do you approach that?
So what did I say earlier about the things that were important to me and what I think I as the CEO, what do I think that we offer all of our employees? Anybody want to talk about them? Number one was impact. Number two?
Financial reward.
Growth and development. Number three, financial reward. Number four? Balance. Okay.
Congratulations, you just won a job at oDesk.
Yeah. Now, those things are different for different people. Some folks may have a family and say, you know what, balance, I don't want to travel. So don't give me a job where I have to travel. Some financial reward, some people may say, you know what, I want a lot of equity, I don't want a lot of cash. Or I don't care about financial reward, I want growth and development, I'll make cash in my next job. I want the experience, right? And so it varies by person, and you can't say, this is balance for me, so that should be balance for you. That's why you have to spend time on the motivation question. And if I'm sitting down with an employee, I want to know, how are we doing against those things? But if you're going to sit down with somebody on your team and you're going to talk about growth and development and you're going to talk about financial reward, and they've been there a year and you're sitting down with them and you're saying, hey, along the lines of financial reward, we're not going to give you a comp increase because you're not knocking it out of the park. Or with regards to growth and development, the company's doubling, but I'm not giving you more, I'm actually taking stuff away because you can't handle the stuff that I gave you, right? Think about this. If your company is doubling, a year from now, if you're in the same job, you're responsible for twice as much with no promotion, right? You now are responsible for twice as much. So if you're in a position where I'm saying, hey, we now have to cut your job in half, that's potentially a problem. That's somebody that's not having growth and development. If anything, they're getting half the job that they had a year ago. That's not really growth and development. Where other people are getting more piled on their shoulders. Why? Because they've proven that they can execute in the thing that they did have. Right? And so I can sit down with an employee and say, look, I owe you growth and development, but we're in a position where I'm taking stuff away. I don't think that's good for you or good for us. You should go somewhere where you have an opportunity to learn more, not less. Right? And along the lines of financial reward, I'm not giving you an increase because you're not on the A team. Right? We kind of divide our population into A's, B's, and C's. And if you're a B, that's okay, but which way are you trending? You trending up or trending down? If you're a C, you probably should go somewhere else because you're not executing here. And if you're an A, I'm going to spend a lot of money to keep you and keep you happy because that's where you get most of your work done.
What percent of your team would you classify as an A right now?
I would say that we have between 10 and 15% A's, probably about 70% B's, and then maybe 10 to 15% C's.
And do you see that as a pretty typical distribution across companies?
I think that it's not so much the distribution or a stack ranking from 1 to N, but it's looking for logical groupings. What is it that this team is doing that this team isn't? Because I think then it makes it really easy to sit down with a B player and say, listen, you're doing a fine job. You're at the bar on most things, above the bar on some things, maybe below the bar on others. But let me tell you the difference between you and somebody who's an A.
And so what is, talk about the character, talk, just no name, but just mentally in your head, grab one of those A's in your company, right? What makes them an A and what makes them an A in relation to a B?
It's impact. It's whatever job they do, they make a big impact in that job. And, earlier I talked about clarity, responsibility, and standards. And these are people that set a high standard, or we as a company set a high standard for their job, and they exceed that standard, right? And it's very easily measured, right? From marketing, you can say your job is signups or first job posts or starts or whatever it is. And you can very easily measure how did they do against that capability or against that standard, and what was it last year, right? How much did it grow, right? And for customer support. It's very easily measured. It's, I don't know, you pick a number. What do you think a good satisfaction rating is? Is it 90%, 95, 96, 98? I don't know, pick a number, and we'll hold you accountable to that. It's people who exceed it, right?
Why don't we try more of a, we're going to go through a lightning round.
Okay.
I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. The business leader you look up to most right now?
Oh my gosh, I heard Elon Musk speak at All Things Digital, and I hadn't really spent much time. I haven't spent any time with him, but oh my God, just super, super impressive. And what you have to admire is just how big the guy thinks. Like, well, gas, we're going to run out of oil. We needed alternative transportation, not maybe in my lifetime, but in somebody's lifetime, and so I had to start on solving that problem in space. Listen, we're going to have to be intergalactic at some point, and somebody should start thinking about that. I figured it should be me. And when I started looking at how much time and how much money it costs to build a rocket, and I looked at a pile of ingredients, and I said, gee, that pile of ingredients should be able to turn into one of those things in a lot less time for a lot less money. I'm going to go solve that problem. And like that, just talk about boss. I mean, that guy, that's huge, right?
Yeah. All right, so we talked about before, if you had to summarize the 3 keys to fundraising and 3 top things, what would you say number 1, 2, and 3 are as succinctly as possible?
I would say focus, 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 and that's one thing, right? I would say, really product market fit. Make sure that you have a product that actually has a market. That's key. If you walk in and VCs don't see that there's a market for what you're trying to solve, that's going to be a problem. And then the third thing is team. Who's doing it with you? And that's what VCs are going to invest in.
Cool. Biggest challenge of joining a team where there's already 2 co-founders and being at the helm, what was that?
Yeah, it was rocky in the beginning. Like I joined and things were great. They hired me in. I mean, they voted and said, yeah, this is the guy. Let's bring this guy in. We like this guy. And within a month, I remember going in a conference room and just having yelling matches and come out and the whole team is like, at their desk really quiet. And I'm like, why is everybody so quiet? We had paper-thin walls and nobody could hear every word. It was like, after one time I heard 2 people in the conference room, I was like, oh, they could probably hear us yelling in there. Hours, 5-hour, like debates, over things. And so I think you have to partner up with people that you like and that you respect and that you can work with because, and what I'll say about our co-founders is the respect, at least from me to them. I don't know if it's mutual or not, but it's just unbelievable. They have capabilities. They're innovators. They're so freaking smart. I mean, to come up with this idea and this vision, 7 years ago. That's just way ahead of its time, and so you have to get with people that you want to be in the trenches with.
Single biggest thing that irks you in running oDesk, internally for your team and then externally?
I have no patience. I'm just, as a sales guy, I loved being a sales guy because you've got this quota, you've got this thing, go sell this thing and make a lot of money, right? And it's just so great. And see customers successful, and nothing made me happier than a big commission check and a happy customer. And you can control it. It's very controllable. And what's frustrating in running a business is, you can control it, but a lot of times you can't, right? Like I can't write a line of code, right? So I can't say, give me that computer and let me write the code. You have to trust that the work is getting done. And when you're an impatient person, there can be tension and friction there. So I think I'm very much a driver. I like to set high standards and hold people accountable. And sometimes I have no patience or empathy. And empathy is a really important characteristic for a CEO, and I struggle with that.
Is that what would you consider your biggest flaw or misgiving as a leader right now? As a snapshot in time?
I would say it's that. It's empathy and, seeking first to understand and then be understood. I'm like, no, understand this. We got to move faster. Time to understand. I'll tell you what you understand. So,
Gary, you are thoughtful, passionate. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for traveling out here and talking about your awesome company.
Thank you very much. It was great fun. Great fun.